Hi everybody, welcome to Friendship Shaving in what is becoming a video log of the processes that I'm trying to use to restore a straight razor. I'm going to be concentrating on the blade this week, and I've just been rubbing the blade with a piece of 3000 grit sandpaper. I was advised to start with a high grit sandpaper so that I wouldn't take away too much of the blade at once. Let me just get a piece of kitchen paper, give that a little bit of a wipe. And I can show you that just with a few minutes you can see that those really dark patches that were particularly on the toe of the blade and these spots here have started to go away already. I can still feel those with my finger. There's still some roughness there, and I wonder if you can see in the light, but there is still quite a lot of pitting on this razor blade. Now let me show you the other side. So you can see that I've done okay with this side. It is quite shiny, but it was a difficult job. I've had a difficult time with this. When I look at this, I can still see that there are scratches in the blade, not from the pitting or the imperfections, but from a low grit piece of sandpaper that I used at some point early on, and that is the problem that I found. I'll come to that again in a little while. Now, the polishing theory is quite easy. You use an abrasive material to rub the blade with, and then once you get all the marks out, you use a less abrasive material to remove the marks you left in the blade the first time out. Practically putting that into practice has been a little difficult for me. I started off with 3000 grit, as you saw, and it didn't really work as well as I would like. The black material came out of the blade, but it left a sort of stain, what I call a watermark, on the blade that I couldn't get out. So I tried with 2000 grit, and again the same thing happened. Now I purchased, let me get a bag out, here it is. I purchased some of these rotary bristles. They come in varying grits from 80, which is the dark green, right the way up to 2500, which is a white. Now once I'd got to 2000 grit on my sandpaper and decided I still needed to go with a lower grit, I thought I would use these wheels. I discovered that I could put 3 onto a spindle, but my rotary tool, which was a very cheap one, was only 1600 revs per minute, and actually that wasn't enough for this job. I couldn't work out, firstly, why it was taking so long, and secondly, why I really wasn't getting a very good result. Once I got down to 80 grit, which is the lowest I could go with the sandpaper, I had got all the marks out of the blade, and obviously I decided to come back up through the grits to polish the grade, but using sandpaper. I've got my pack of sandpaper here. I used 120 grit to start working my way up, and I found that 120 grit was actually much more aggressive than the 80 grit wheel. So that kind of didn't work too well. Once I had those 120 grit gouges in the metal, I had to work hard at trying to get them out. That was the hard part. It wasn't sanding the blade, although it is reasonably difficult and time consuming. It was getting the scratches out and seeing the scratches left by the first grade of sandpaper. Typically what was happening was that I'd be working here and I'd go through 120, 150, 180, 220 and so on up through the grades, and then I'd change position and the light would hit the blade differently, and then I'd have grits still in the blade that I could see from an earlier piece of sandpaper. And I went back and did it again and did it again and did it again, and I've actually found it quite difficult. And this is what I've left with here, although it looks quite shiny and it is pretty good, but when I look closely at it, I can see that there are grit marks in it, and I don't like it. One of my subscribers a few weeks ago, Keith, said that he thought I was a bit of a perfectionist. And Keith, I think perhaps you are right. I think perhaps you've spotted a bit of my personality. I didn't quite realise I was such a perfectionist, but I think I am. I have had the offer from my friend Dean that he can put this through his woofers, which is the term he uses for putting it on his professional buffing wheel, to take those slight scratches out of the metal, to save me going back and doing it again, because if I keep doing it I'm going to wear down the steel and I don't want to do that. I did try, this is quite important, a really good bit of advice. Let's imagine this is a piece of 120 grit sandpaper. So I'd be working away like this and I'd use my 120 and I'd get to a point where I think, okay, that's enough. There are no marks or blemishes. All I can see on the blade are grit marks from the sandpaper. So then what I was doing was trying to sand the blade this way so that all the grit marks were going in a different direction to the first ones, so that I could easily see, or more easily see, when I'd removed those marks. Now, I've been advised, because this is I believe it's a full hollow ground blade. It's not just a gentle curve. It's a curve and then a bit and then another curve down to the sharp point of the blade. And I was advised that if I continued to do it this way, there is a chance that I could just affect the geometry and the grind of this blade, which I didn't want to do. So I have been just doing it this way, and it's been quite difficult, I must admit. Added to that, my rotary tool actually broke. So I have a new one in the den. It's been kindly sent to me. It is a much more powerful tool. My 1600 grit sounded quite powerful to the uninitiated, but this new one I've got here it goes from 10,000 revs per minute up to 40,000 revs per minute. So it is a vast improvement on the 1600 revs per minute machine that I have. just a word that these work quite well at 10,000 revs a minute, but at 40,000 they have a tendency to melt and break. And yes, that happens very, very quickly, almost before you can stop it happening. So that really is where I'm at the moment. If I were to offer 2 pointers, that things that I've learned so far is that number one, you've got two options. Either to buy a piece of quality machinery, or machinery of a reasonable quality, or to go with sandpaper. Lots of people do just use sandpaper, but it is a little bit time consuming. The other point that I would make about sandpaper is to buy high quality sandpaper, something where you can be reasonably assured that the grit size is going to be the same throughout the piece of sandpaper that you're using, rather than a cheaper bit of sandpaper where you might not have even grit sizes, and without realizing you're actually leaving deeper grooves in the metal than you intended. So that is my advice for that. And that is really the stage that I'm up to at the moment. That is the side of the blade with 3000 grit. I do need to go further with that, but I probably will not go down to 120 grit. I think that was too far, and that was my mistake. The mistake was swapping from sandpaper to rotary bristles and not having a good enough tool for those to be effective, and then jumping back to sandpaper. I think had I stuck with sandpaper and gone from 1000 and maybe tried 800 or 600, I think I would have been a lot better off, because honestly I've sanded this about 4 times, and as I said, I've still got marks in it. So I might just send that off to Dean for a final little buff to get those out. But I am going to give this side a go first. What I don't want to do is keep going and keep going and keep going on this side and actually ruin a really, really nice blade. So that's where we're at. I've learned some things. The next time you see me, I'll be drawing out the handle on a piece of paper and getting a right fit for the blade, and we'll go from there. I hope this little video has been useful. It's I think for me it's like all things. I have an idea that I can do something, but the actual practicality of it shows me that I'm not quite as good as I imagined. But I think the very first time we try something, that's always going to happen, and that's how we learn. And that's what I'm getting from this. It's a really good learning process for me, and well, I hope you pick something up out of it, and well, I'll see you next time around. Thanks now, take care, bye bye.